Our latest CBS News poll shows that a majority of Americans are in favor of President Trump's impeachment. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, tell us more about why a majority of Americans support the president's impeachment, and also what are their views on the attack at the Capitol?
Hey there, Alana. Well, the two things are connected in this sense. First of all, you have what everybody out there might expect, very typical partisan splits on this. So you have a lot of Democrats in favor going into today of impeachment, majority of independents too, that's important, and only 15% of Republicans. Now, if you look then, as you mentioned, at what the views were of just what happened at the Capitol, well, we look at the descriptions that people use. And when you start to look at some of those descriptions that move toward the things that were in the articles of impeachment, incitement of violence from the president is what they were talking about. Well, look at these descriptions here. Insurrection. People think that that was what occurred at the Capitol when they watched it. 85% of Democrats, 57% of independents, but only a third of Republicans, an attempt to overthrow the government. Also, sizable numbers of Democrats feeling that that's what they were seeing, majority of independents, but less so Republicans. Republicans tended to say a protest that went too far. So when you see people giving these descriptions, they were also more likely to then favor impeachment. And that's how those two things are somewhat related. Now, I should say there, just to button this up, that a very large majority of Americans were condemning what they saw, but it was exactly what they described it as that really mattered a great deal, Lana.
Still, it's interesting to see those numbers among Republicans. 56% saw it as an attempt to overturn the election. Nearly a third, as you say, looking at it as an attempt to overthrow the government or insurrection. That even among Republicans, that attack on the Capitol was very poorly received. I want to talk a little bit more about that. And specifically, many people have suggested that law enforcement would have treated these rioters differently if they had been people of color. What do Americans have to say about that, according to our polling?
Well, so in the polling, folks told us, first of all, was race a factor in what they saw as the way law enforcement treated the people who forced their way into the Capitol? And for starters, you do get this majority. You get this 54% who feel that, yes, it was. Now, again, we get some partisan differences here. Large majority of Democrats feeling, majority of independents slightly, and very few Republicans. But then you take that 54% right here and you ask them, okay, so what might have been the case had the people who went into the Capitol, had they been people of color? Well, what our respondents overwhelmingly told us, the ones who thought that race was a factor, 81% felt that the protesters and the people who went into the Capitol were treated better than they would have been had they been people of color. And so that is a very dramatic number that shows that people who thought it was a factor felt like there may have been a double standard there, Lana.
All right, Anthony, so what comes next? What do Americans actually expect to come out of this impeachment?
Okay, well, that's a really good question going forward. So when folks thought that they favored impeachment heading into this, well, why was it? Well, number one answer for them was that it would send a signal that they, in their view, the president's behavior was wrong. Also, and you just mentioned this a little bit in a recent segment, they felt that it would help prevent the president from running for office again. Now, of course, that has to happen through the Senate, but to help prevent that, or maybe a step in their view. And also, I should note, another description they used was showing in their view that democracy will defend itself. Now, by contrast, Lana, the people who opposed impeachment, they tended to say that that would cause more division in the country. And that's echoing a lot of the rhetoric, a lot of the things you heard today from Republican members of the House in their speeches. One little interesting note I will add to this, though, is that this sentiment was not necessarily closely related to views on impeachment overall, because a lot of people who still nonetheless supported impeachment thought that it would also perhaps cause the president's supporters to protest more or cause more division in the country. And nonetheless, they still favored impeachment for those other reasons we talked about before.
All right, Anthony Salvanto, thank you.
Thank you.